Boruto chapter 12 was another absolute banger. We saw Boruto one-shot one of the awakened claw grimes, we found out that Rasengan Uzuhiko is far more busted than we ever imagined, and it could even be a limitless technique. And we also just witnessed our boy Boruto's first L since returning from the time skip, with Juro pulling off a crazy cross-map 360 no-scope as if he was playing Call of freaking Duty. But how do we even reach the point where Boruto got knocked straight onto his ass and is on the brink of death? So the chapter kicks off where we left, with Boruto staring down Hidari and asking Konohamaru to look after Himawari. Now I think straight away it is very interesting that Boruto still refers to Konohamaru as his sensei or master, which I think slightly caught Konohamaru off guard since he just kind of stood there blank faced for the time being. Anyways, Hidari uses this conversation as an opening and tries to catch Boruto off guard, but obviously that shit wouldn't work against my glorious King Boruto, and we see the panel that was given to us in the sneak peek where Boruto not only blocks the attack with part of his sword, but manages to use hand signs using one hand and knock Hidari away with a wind release jutsu. Now this only managed to knock Hidari away for a little bit, while Konohamaru manages to grab Hidari and eventually get her away to a slightly safer location since she is unconscious right now. Anyways, we then jump to Kawaki and Delta, who are just kind of watching Juro since they were obviously going to go there to try and save Himawari before Boruto flew past them to save her. Kawaki talks about how Boruto's flying Raijin is an instant teleportation since his presence shifted in an instant. Now it's very important to note here that Kawaki does not care whatsoever about the state of Team 10, but all he seemed to be concerned about was Boruto's strength and the fact that he was teleporting everywhere. Now I don't know about you, but this is a very telling sign that once again Kawaki is in despair about his current lack of power. And this seed that was planted and sprouted in Boruto Part 1 about Kawaki's lust for power has over time mutated and started to bloom once again after the time skip. Every time we have seen Kawaki in 2 Blue Vortex, there was always a discussion about power regarding his name. Whether it was Delta in chapter 11 telling Kawaki that he is no match for Juro, Boruto telling Kawaki again and again that he is fodder compared to him, as well as Kawaki thinking the same thing in his own head, and even Juro wiping the floor with him when Kawaki confronted him. All of these are going to continue to build up inside of Kawaki, and I believe once again this is going to trigger a new awakening inside of him. We know that when Kawaki is most helpless, there is always some external force that allows him to achieve his goals. Whether that was Ada's omnipotence or Karma V2, Kawaki always gains something advantageous when things aren't going his way. Since we know that this went as far as triggering a power only obtainable by Otsutsuki gods, it isn't too far-fetched to assume that omnipotence could happen again. But this time it could be in the form of his karma undergoing another transformation, leading him into a Karma V3 state. If you want me to do an entire video dedicated to this awakening, then make sure to comment that down below and like this video so I know that that is a video that people want to see. But getting back to the chapter, Delta asked the sensory team about the condition of Team 10, and we were told that they've managed to get to the center of Konoha in order to get some treatment for all of the Team 10 and obviously Inogen. Once again, what I just discussed is reaffirmed as the sensory team give Delta and Kawaki the location of Boruto, to which Delta says, "There you go, Kawaki," implying that this is the only information that Kawaki was really concerned about. Going back to Boruto's situation, Konohamaru reminds Boruto of his position in the village as a traitor, and he shouldn't just casually be going in and out of the village as he pleases. To which Sarada reminds this stupid, useless donut that Boruto is the only reason they haven't all been put in a pack by Hidari. But Konohamaru kind of brushes that off and tells Boruto that Hidari can use claw marks and claw grimes in the same way that Code could, meaning that they can be ambushed at any moment. And Boruto asks this absolutely useless sensory guy, who might even be the same person from Boruto Part 1, who was supposed to keep an eye on Boruto and Kawaki on lockdown, but failed miserably at that, and look what happened, and yeah, we're in an awful state because of that moment. But Boruto tells him to make sure to look out for the claw grime that emerge, and he reacts in a similar way to Konohamaru, calling Boruto a traitor, and why should he ever take orders from someone in Boruto's position? So I think Kishimoto really wants to hammer home the idea that Konoha's perspective of Boruto has only grown worse as more time went on, with Boruto not being in the village. Anyway, Sumire tells Boruto that Sarada is Hidari's target, and that his only real goal is to consume Sarada, and he's even ignored opportunities to kill the rest of them to get his hands on Sarada. Konohamaru then realizes that the tree that consumed Sasuke is the same situation that happened to Moegi, and Boruto explains that these claw grimes are born from the tree or subject's chakra, but are not physically tied to that person, and they only resemble the abilities of that person. So they do not need to hold back when it comes to defeating these guys. And their priority right now is to kill them at all costs to bring back the person consumed by the tree. which we will see later in the chapter as to why this is so important. And Konohamaru asks what we have all been thinking on how Boruto has so much information on these guys, to which Boruto shuts down and just tells them to focus on protecting Himawari. Hopefully this means that we can look forward to an explanation as to how Kashin Koji knows all of this stuff about the Claw Grime after this fight is done, and when Boruto is talking to everyone not mid-battle, since we know that Kashin Koji is the source of all of Boruto's current information. Anyways, Hidari decides to spawn a bunch of Claw Grime to ambush Boruto and the rest of them, to which Boruto tries to reduce the numbers while Sarada focuses on not getting caught by Hidari. Boruto manages as per usual to cut through most of the Claw Grime with ease, while Sarada tries to take on a few on her own. However, Hidari manages to come through one of the Claw Grimes as she is still fighting them with some wood style jutsu to try and obviously take Sarada away. But Boruto reminds Hidari not to mess with his future wife, and he throws a shuriken into the back of one of the Claw Grimes, which had one of his seals to allow him to use the Flying Thunder God and teleport behind Hidari. Boruto then instantly makes a Rasengan and blows Hidari's back out, causing Hidari to retreat back to the Ten Tails dimension. Now I think something which is slightly overlooked about this sequence is the fact that Boruto is using an extremely tactical fighting style, rather than just trying to brute force everything, similar to what the rest of the characters are doing in Boruto TBV Vortex. And I absolutely love this change from Kishimoto, as I feel like a more tactical fighting style had been completely lost since the start of Boruto, and it seemed to be a case of who was written to be stronger narratively, and there was no sense of being able to overcome a stronger person using just tactical fighting styles, which is what made Naruto fights so much better and more interesting to watch. So I'd love to see this continued in Boruto, as we can still have all those flashy jutsu like Rasengan Uzuhiko, Flying Raijin, and world-busting power scaling to occur, and all of that makes Boruto great, but it also is allowed to incorporate more of what made Naruto Part 1 so interesting to watch. Also, we need to consider the fact that Boruto instantly managed to make a Rasengan, which is extremely impressive, and just shows the amount of training he has put into refining every technique he had learned previously, which is a very subtle but huge amount of character development for Boruto, as previously he would take any shortcuts he can in order to learn something as quickly as possible, rather than doing the full course of learning something, which means there is no holes or gaps in his knowledge in any of his abilities, and it also makes each one of his attacks that much more potent. Anyways, Hidari is back in the Ten Tails realm, sat on the chakra cube, and it looks like the root of the Ten Tails is attaching to him and rejuvenating the damage that was dealt to Hidari. Sarada obviously saw that that attack that Boruto just used worked, so she tells Boruto to stop flying around again so that they can do a similar attack and actually defeat Hidari this time. But Boruto instead wants to build up a huge Rasengan Uzuhiko in order to defeat Hidari in one hit. We then finally get a bit more information on how Rasengan Uzuhiko works, and I think that this deserves its own video, but it makes so much sense as to how it actually works, as well as why Boruto was able to come up with this attack. Anyways, Rasengan Uzuhiko uses the planetary chakra or nature energy to build up a Rasengan, but instead of using that chakra and rotating it in like a ball shape that will fit in his hand, Boruto uses the planet's rotation as a way for the chakra to rotate and remain contained within a certain spot. He manipulates the rotation to instead revolve around him, which allows him to then utilize that chakra that's been built up from the planet. Boruto refers to planetary rotation and orbital revolution, as well as centripetal force. Now, I did sort of do a physics degree, so I know a little something about these things, but it has been a little while, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But essentially, in simple terms, the planet is huge, so it has a very quick rotation for it to be able to do one revolution in 24 hours. Boruto then makes himself the center of this rotation, hence the orbital revolution. And then all he has to do is control the centripetal force exerted on the chakra in order to control it around his body, and for him to be able to use that chakra in one of his attacks. The reason this is so difficult is because of how high the centripetal force would be, and Boruto needs to be able to overcome that and control it in order to control the planetary chakra. And the reason this is so potent is simply because of how much energy and chakra is stored within the planet, which we have seen from Sage Mode, which is also my next point. Since Kashin Koji is a clone of Jiraiya, we know that he is associated with the frogs and toads, or wherever they are, in very similar ways to Jiraiya. But since they are different, Kashin Koji isn't necessarily a Sage Mode user, but still understands the fundamentals of nature energy, and instead of teaching Boruto Sage Mode like Jiraiya did Naruto, he taught Boruto about nature energy and its fundamentals, and Boruto took that understanding and managed to create a new Rasengan. This is actually a very interesting concept when you think about it, since we know that Naruto was not necessarily a genius and needed a lot of guidance when it came to mastering Sage Mode. Whereas on the contrary, Minato was a similar prodigy to Boruto, where he could create and utilize Jutsu in a way that nobody had done before. And we have seen the comparison made in the story many times that Boruto compares a lot more to his grandfather rather than Naruto when it comes to being a prodigy, and hence why he went down the route of creating his own jutsu rather than trying to learn a pre-existing one. We find out that the longer Boruto is in contact with the ground, the more planetary chakra he can accumulate, meaning there is actually no limit to Rasengan Uzuhiko. Hidari, hearing this, tries to catch Boruto off guard, but Konohamaru finally, for what seems like the first time ever, does something and blocks Hidari's Chidori with a new technique called Rasen Barricade, to which Boruto reminds him that his objective is to look after Himari and he can look after himself, to which Konohamaru tries to flame the young god once again. I can't lie, this guy needs a reality check, because Boruto could legit use a shadow clone, one finger, his eyes closed, and this guy would still get rocked. But since Hidari has covered the floor in claw marks, he manages to surprise Sarada and grab her with his mutated wood style, but Sarada manages to get off the hand signs and let off a lightning attack, which I'm not sure about the English translations for, but it seems to be like a Chidori which covers the whole body called Chidori Current, which manages to stop Hidari and allows Sarada to grab a hold of his arm and lob him towards Boruto, who says that he hasn't really had enough time but he still can't miss this opportunity and decides to unleash his built-up Rasengan Uzuhiko, which engulfs the entire area, in which seems to be a huge Rasengan, which then extends vertically and shrinks horizontally, which is very unique, but I'm sure this is just to make it obvious that Boruto is using Rasengan Uzuhiko rather than a normal Rasengan, and we will probably get more explanation behind this power in the future, but this attack was so potent that it manages to blow away Hidari's entire body, apart from his head and one arm. But I think that was enough for Hidari to escape and regenerate, as it seemed that he was trying to get into his claw marks at the time. But Boruto isn't close enough or ready, so Hidari is already somewhat submerged in the claw grime, but somehow Kawaki manages to get there in time and shrink the claw marks, and he lands on top of Hidari and mutates his left arm, and then finally lets off a huge blast which ultimately destroys the rest of Hidari's body, and leaves behind this spiky Rinnegan, which Boruto confirms with Kashin Koji to be the Soul Thorn. But again, there is something slightly subtle here, as Kashin Koji states that he has checked that this is what it actually is supposed to be. This is very, very weird, since what could he possibly be checking it against? And I think that this is set up or foreshadowing that Kashin Koji is holding something which provides him with all this information regarding the Ten Tails, since Boruto seemed to have an understanding on what these guys were before they had even awakened, which will be very interesting to see and where he got all of this information from. And I have a feeling that it either links to Amado's past research or it could actually be something from Orochimaru. But if it was the case that Amado's research had been done before, it would once again make him a very, very sussy backer. But that's pretty normal for him, and I feel like he's gone slightly under the radar again, as we are all focusing on Boruto and the Awakened Claw Grimes, but I'm sure he will have a slightly more commanding role in the future of Boruto. Anyways, Boruto states that this is the key to turn Sasuke back into his normal self, but he says that that's what he's heard, not that he knows that that's the truth. Kawaki is obviously confused and asks where Boruto got his information from, and Boruto just says if Kawaki doesn't get out of his way, Boruto won't hesitate to dismantle Kawaki once again. But before Boruto can explain any more, Juro lands some crazy cross-mount 360 no-scope on Boruto and lands a huge Biju bomb, which is the first time we have seen Boruto get any injury, which is huge for the story. But since Boruto is basically knocked out from this attack, he drops a Soul Thorn, and since Sarada realizes that this is the key to saving her father, she tries to retrieve it as well. But she also gets sniped by the hitman himself, but luckily no vitals were hit for either of them, so they will likely be able to recover. But the problem is that Juro manages to pull the Soul Thorn, to which Boruto is obviously concerned about, and I'm sure this is for a good reason, as we will probably find out in the coming chapters. But Juro states that he didn't realize that Boruto knew about the Thorn Soul, and that is much more problematic towards their goals, so he needs to kill Boruto ASAP. But Kawaki again is viewed as fodder, and Juro just calls him Ten Tails food, which, like I said earlier, is even more proof that Kawaki is going to need a big power up. But there is so much we need to find out about this Soul Thorn, and I think that I need to do an entire separate video discussing what it could be or what it could lead to for Boruto's future. But I also think it's just weird that Juro already knew about this, and it's also very weird that he seems to be the only one of the Claw Grimes to have the knowledge of this so far. I don't know who Juro's tree was made from, but for some reason it seems to be by far the strongest and most knowledgeable, which is very, very interesting. But that is where the chapter ends, and since this Soul Thorn is so interesting, I'm going to make a whole video dedicated to it, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss when I drop that video. But just quickly, I think that there is 3 likely outcomes. One of them being Jura eats it and becomes much stronger and turns into some final boss, which I think is unlikely for a few reasons. Number 2, Jura holds onto it or feeds it back to the Ten Tails to create a new Hidari clone, or Boruto manages to get it back and free Sasuke, but since Boruto probably doesn't have any marks in the Otsutsuki realm, if Jura goes back and drops it off there, even if Boruto manages to defeat Jura, Boruto will have no way of getting his hands on it once again. Anyways, that is going to be it for this video. If you did enjoy them, please consider liking and subscribing. As of recording this video, we are only at 1,003 subscribers, so please subscribe, as I want to reach 1,100 subscribers by the end of July or August. And if you do want to support this channel, it does mean a lot to me, so thank you to all of you guys that have already subscribed. Also, comment your thoughts about this chapter or anything you don't necessarily agree with in the comments down below. But with that all said, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.